And on that note, we are talking about navigating the advocacy and regulatory environment in the potato industry. It's a discussion that sits right at the intersection of innovation, policy, and food security. While the potato may seem quite simple, the systems that govern its production and its movement are anything but simple. Regulation can either be a springboard for innovation or it can be a stumbling block. And in a rapidly shifting world of climate demands, export potential, digital disruption, and emerging farmers, the stakes have never been higher. And of course, we're joined by a powerhouse of experts this afternoon from legal, scientific, industry, and tech backgrounds who are uniquely positioned to unpack what's working, what's not, and where bold change is needed. Let me introduce them to you. Annelise Crosby on my left is the Head of Legal Intelligence at Agbiz. On her left, Mr. Caritas Tsinsolo, CEO of Kula, a platform disrupting agri-access. To Caritas' left, Professor Peter van der Zaag, you've just heard from him, and of course he is the chair of the World Potato Council. Willie Jacobs, CEO of Potato SA, needs no introduction in this forum. And on the end there, best for last, Dr. Carmen Miller, postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pretoria, specializing in nutrition. Welcome all. Thank you for your insights. We look forward to unpacking how we look at this regulatory and advocacy space in the potato value chain. And I want to start by setting the scene to find out what's really holding back progress in the potato industry when it comes to policy and regulation. And I want to start with you, Annelise, to find out what are some of the most urgent regulatory pain points in the potato value chain.
Yeah, so the regulatory environment, of course, is the legislation that is applicable to the sector or a subsector in this particular case. And there are so many laws that are applicable to our sector. And it's an ever-changing environment as well. So what are the things that are pain points today may not necessarily be so tomorrow, but there will be new ones. So currently, I think it is Act 36 of 1947, and specifically the 2023 regulations around the pest control operators. And before lunch, Sarah gave a very good exposition of what is going on in that environment. But I think it is quite concerning how that is playing out currently. And it's a challenge for the industry to keep up with the changes. Secondly, I think for this industry, probably the upcoming change in the National Water Act. We expect the amendment bill to be tabled in Parliament before the end of the year. And there are a couple of things there around further limitations, maybe even a prohibition on the trading of water use entitlements, as well as further conditions that can be imposed on existing lawful use. There's going to be even a bigger emphasis on transformation when it comes to the issuing of license and then the transfer of water rights and all of that. There's talk of other water sectors that may be other sectors that may be getting some of our water that we're currently using for agriculture, and also limitations that can be placed on the exercise of water rights in so-called water scarce areas. So we'll have to keep a close eye on all of that. Then when it comes to land use, the Preservation and Development of Agricultural Land Act was signed into law earlier this year. It's not in effect as yet. The department is working on the regulations currently. And whilst the law, I think, is to be welcomed in principle because it will protect the agricultural resource for the purposes of farming, which is very important to us. It will also bring about a new regulatory regime in the sense that the minister will be able to declare protected agricultural areas and also listed activities where particular conditions can apply. Then when it comes to land reform, there's a law on the horizon. We'll probably not see it in Parliament before next year, but it's called the Equitable Access to Land Bill. And that will be all about redistribution, how government is going to go about redistribution, possibly the circumstances under which land will be able to be expropriated for redistribution purposes. And there's also, once again, talk of possible land ceiling, so a cap on the amount of hectares.
We've got a bit of a mic issue here. Let's just see if we can get you a temp mic. I'm going to test if it works now. No. Can we?
Oh, it's back. Okay, great stuff. And then, lastly, of course, the employment equity targets that have been set now by the minister, and that employers that employ more than 50 people will have to comply with.
So it is certainly a challenging space, lots to look out for that is either coming or changing, that amidst the already complex production environment, the challenges that producers face in terms of nature. Coming back to the farmer's valley, is there a disconnect between production and policy and practice? Are there things that farmers sit and worry about and that they maybe share with you and say, but we get the thinking behind this, but on a practical level, it just doesn't work for us the way it should?
Yeah, Ali, certainly. It takes us back to the conversation that Dewald had yesterday as well. The biggest disconnect will always be the fact that legislation takes a very long time to adapt to the circumstances in the field. And it's not necessarily always aligned to what is happening in the production space as well. So we find ourselves continuously in a space where, like for instance in the genetic progress that we've made, that the legislation doesn't accommodate it. And it's going to take some time for the legislation to adopt it. And the communication between ourselves as producers and to the regulator at that specific point, where you can actually carry a strong enough message, is one of the proper, I think, limitations that we're currently experiencing in the industry.
Peter, you've got an interesting global perspective in this South African context. What regulatory practices stand out for you in the global context that South Africa should look to? And are there any areas that you've been exposed to where we're perhaps ahead of the curve in terms of regulations?
Well, I talk about diploid potatoes, for example. From what I understand here, to bring in diploid botanical seed from another country is almost impossible. And the diploid botanical seed is basically pathogen-free. It may carry PSTV, which is the only thing it could possibly carry, yet those who get it can't even use it. Regulatory issue. Cisgenics and CRISPR technology. Two things to make existing varieties like Mondial or Seafair or whatever better with late blight resistance or some cooking quality issue being silenced could be easily introduced to help the farmers be more efficient and have your host less storage loss. Again, not allowed in South Africa. It's partly political, it's partly policy, it's partly the buyers of McDonald's or whatever are afraid of it as well. So it's a complex issue, but it has to be addressed. Now in the United States, in Canada, these things are making progress. We're lagging behind here.
Okay.
And they can follow what we're doing there and adopt it here, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So there's some things that we can replicate that are being used already
Exactly.
overseas to try.
I saw this morning, he talked about the USDA, about this biostimulant. That was USDA approved, they can approve it here. Why can't they do the same thing with other technologies?
Caritas, I want to come now to you and find out whether regulation has helped or hindered your work in building Kula, because we hear so many stories about regulations not being there to assist businesses in their growth journey.
Yeah, I think on our side, I think part of being a tech business is to be able to be nimble and to be able to work around the constraints that may be presented to you. I don't think we've had any direct hindrances to the work that we are doing. I think the hurdles are more on the farmer side, like Peter has mentioned, in terms of approvals of certain varieties, or in terms of even on the input side, in terms of how long it takes to get an input product ready from conceptual phase to a point where it can actually be implemented. But I think on our side, part of the value as a tech company is to bring a product that is practical, a product that works for farmers. And one thing we learned very quickly early on is that farmers don't just want tech for tech's sake. They just they don't want to just hear the word AI. They don't want to just click on buttons because it's fascinating or because it's interesting. Farmers want to know you need to either be making them more money or be able to save them money. So the technology needs to have a very practical endpoint if you want to get adoption from farmers. They're not averse to technology, but you cannot come to farmers with technology for technology's sake. It needs to be practical. And that's why I'm always not a fan of people saying we are disrupting. We're not so much disrupting, but we're adding value to the industry. We're trying to help make it easier for farmers to sell the products that they plant, make it easier for them to source the inputs, and crucially for your more emerging guys, getting that financing piece in. And we've had to work around the regulation essentially to make that possible. So it's about us bringing practical solutions to farmers, and that means adding efficiency, cutting costs, and increasing the bottom line. No matter how good the tech is, if you're not doing that for the farmer, your tech company will never grow.
Just latching onto that in terms of bringing down the cost of technology, making technology more accessible. And this sort of plays a little bit into the regulatory space here and in terms of trade regulations. And we've seen a lot of volatility of late, and we know that's coming from the outside in. It's not something that's necessarily within our control, but perhaps our policy response to trade shifts and how imports of tech, what the future looks like. Does that space worry you for the coming couple of years?
In terms of bringing in new tech?
Yeah, in terms of how accessible tech is. I mean, and tariffs, trade wars, how does that influence what you're able to make accessible to farmers? Are you talking only local?
No, I think the tech, again, is supposed to help the farmers navigate that environment. So it's around how does the tech come in. For example, if you're having issues with a particular market because of high tariffs, tech is supposed to come in as a player to open up new markets that you otherwise would not have been able to gain access to. I think if you look at, even on the emerging side, part of the big value we add for the farmers is that they don't have to worry about finding a buyer because the platform already has, the top buyers in the country on there. They don't have to worry too much about sourcing different quotations from different suppliers because that's all on the platform. So the true value of tech is to make it easier to operate in a difficult environment. Yeah. I think it shouldn't necessarily be succumb to all the pressures of the environment. It's about how does the tech come in to make it easier in that environment. A good example, I think a truly South African example is Eskom Sepush, that whole app. It was a difficult environment. You see, everybody knows it. It was a difficult environment, but it's a small tech thing that came and helped us to navigate a tough environment. So the value of us as a tech company is to make it easier for the farmers to navigate different challenges that come with the environment. For example, on the financing side, with some of the farmers they put up on the screen with Zavuya, etc., it's tough for them to get financing as first-generation guys because they don't have, many years financial statements. They might not have, audited financials, etc. How does the tech come in? How do we bring the banks in to say, hey, let's look at this same problem that we've had, but let's look at it from a different lens. So the value of tech is to make it easier to operate in a tough environment. If it doesn't do that, so the tough environment creates opportunity for technology service providers.
Willie, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think, and Annelies has alluded to it, there's a complex environment for a producer to operate within in the legislative environment. And one thing that I've experienced myself is you can really incorporate a lot of that regulatory aspects within the use of technology. For instance, your whole compliance system can be done online. We had companies here that does a full traceability, which also connects to all the legislation that's below that as well. I think the more efficient our technology will be, the less farmers will actually really be exposed to the effects of legislation and limitations on that. The clear doors that are open will be open, and the ones that are blocked you will never be able to see in that space.
Carmen, I want to come to you. Innovation when it comes to nutrition, packaging, the consumer, where should we be looking for opportunities, and what is currently holding us back, perhaps?
I think in South Africa and in the potato market as a whole, we are very lucky that we have an extremely diverse market. We have everything from our 10 Rand market to our 100 Rand market, so there is something for everyone. But just targeting the right market with the right message, and in order to do that, there was a lot of mention of consumer education over the past few days, which is an excellent way to go. But doing consumer education without knowing your consumer, knowing what your consumer wants, and we talk about the knowledge, attitudes, and perceptions of the consumer. So once you know the knowledge, attitudes, and perceptions of the consumers, you can address those things and adapt it. One of the misconceptions that we still have about potatoes is that they are fattening, and that is completely false. And educating the consumer in that way, that just as a celery stick isn't going to make you skinny, a bag of chips isn't going to make you fat. To get that message across to the consumer and inform our consumer and know what they think about potatoes. It doesn't help we are broadcasting a message to them that is irrelevant to them or that they don't believe in. So know what they think, how they want to spend, what they want to spend on, in which manner they want to spend, and address those issues that the consumer really want over the various income segments and markets of the consumer, to ensure that what we tell them and the message that we supply to them is what they want. And that also links to labeling, what we put on the label. We have a variety of consumers, or the diverse consumer market reads a label in different ways. So what they read on their 10-kilogram bag versus what they read on a bag of processed potatoes. So adapt the labeling accordingly, that you tell the consumers the message that they need to hear, but also that they want to hear, that is backed by scientific evidence, but that is translated into a consumer-friendly manner.
Annelies, coming back to you, and we're still talking here about innovation and what's holding us back. Are there talks of introducing innovation sandboxes or more flexible regulatory zones for testing agri-tech? We talk so often about removing red tape, making it easier for business people in general and in the agricultural space, for new businesses, new entrants to the market, to be able to test out solutions and fast-track them into the market. But are our regulators and our policymakers thinking of how they can remove those barriers?
At the moment in the agricultural space, I don't think we have that flexibility as yet. It's a very interesting concept, these regulatory innovation sandboxes. It allows an experimental kind of environment where innovation can be tested, and you bring the regulators on board, and they can then develop legislation, regulation that is fit for purpose, which would be ideal, for example, for the gene editing technology, because our current GMO legislation is not fit for purpose when it comes to that kind of technology. And there's a lot of innovation happening in the agribusiness sector. I think there's a survey that gets done every few years, an agricultural business innovation survey, and according to the latest one, about 2/3 of agribusinesses are actively involved in innovation. And you get these sandboxes in the fintech industry in our country already. And apparently in Africa, in October 2024, there were 25 national sandboxes in 15 countries. But in South Africa, as far as I'm aware, and I may not be aware of everything that's happening, but we don't have that as yet. And you have to have the willingness on the side of the regulators to be involved and to be flexible.
Philly, I want to come to you again. We hear so often about phytosanitary compliance, food safety, traceability, global gap. There's all these requirements for people wanting to export. Are we ready for global export markets? What?
Seems like
And for what's coming?
Seems like Peter needs to answer that question, but if you don't talk about ready for global export markets, I'm not sure about the tariff situation that's currently happening in the world. I think that's a complexity on its own. But I just think from the experience that we had with trying to export potatoes to Russia this past year, I don't think anything can really prepare you for the process that you need to go through when you do something like that before you actually start it. So our readiness will really depend on our willingness to start probing those options and really go through the process. I think Dirk will support me on this one. We will probably only be able to load the first potatoes out to Russia in the next season, although we already had product available to export this year. So, and the issue is not necessarily our understanding of what the legislation is, but there's no global harmonization of certain legislation points. It's a simple thing that the British have explained to me when they had Brexit is that they didn't have any type of harmonization with regulation on moving of plant material between themselves in Europe because it was one unit. So the legislation just didn't exist. So I think if we really want to get there where we can globalize our trade, the necessity to have a single source of, let's call it globalization methodology, which will also help us to support our regulation. If you look at the reason why we're changing our chemical regulation, is because of what's happening in Europe, and they are delivering the deepest voice on that. So our purpose would really be to make sure that from a global point of view, we've got a central point where we can actually navigate this issue.
Peter, as an outsider, what do you think of how involved our commodity organizations like Potato South Africa are in terms of influencing policy and regulatory decisions? Do you think that we've gotten to a point where the policymakers, the government bodies, the legislators listen to industry role players and take their advice on board? Because it's difficult to sometimes formulate an opinion from
I have to
itself.
give a nice answer because the boss is right here. No, frankly, I've worked in 60 countries on the planet on potatoes. 60, mostly developing countries. I would say that out of all those 60 countries, South Africa probably ranks in the top 3 for how you work as an organization, how you work with your farmers, and how you, in fact, influence policy at the government level, at the local level, with universities and other institutions. My hat goes off to what this organization does.
Thank you.
And it all starts with that paper bag with a levy fee on it. So, just to be a little bit funny here, we were up in Limpopo the other day. About half the potatoes from there go across borders, unofficially, no problem. So, but the farmers there sacrifice income because they sell too cheap. South Africa loses money because they don't pay. So you see, there's leakages everywhere as well. So, is it better for Mozambique and for Zambia and Zimbabwe and Botswana to have this arrangement? They're happy. Those guys are like hawks over here buying potatoes. So that's the informal trade system, right? But it hurts your farmers as well. So I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong. I just observe it and think the paper bag method is great, the levy fee. So farmers are actually paying even for this event, plus the sponsors, of course. But it's just amazing what you do here. So congratulations.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So strengthening organizations is critical to this regulatory and policy environment for growing towards the future. And while our informal market has its place, there is no future, I think, in South Africa where we're going to do away with the informal market because it works for so many of our people. But we also want to draw farmers into commercialization, developing farmers to be able to grow their businesses, to contribute their voices to the policy environment through being members of organizations like Potato South Africa. So how do we change policies to make it easier for emerging farmers to commercialize? Any of you like to have a first stab at it? Yes.
But my comment, I'm grateful to Kula for paying for my trip. I'm not sure how that exactly worked exactly. So
They get me in trouble.
no. So between South Africa and Kula, I'm here. But the point is, I think what I saw was the emerging farmers. We visited 4 of them last few days, and there's 2 issues that I think are very important. One is land tenure, land ownership, the uncertainty of that. That became loud and clear. The second thing is the pack houses for these emerging farmers are not economically feasible. The farmers are too small, the pack houses are too big, and to operate those pack houses for only a few days in a year does not pay. So a restructuring of the way that the emerging farmers work, maybe as cooperative groups or as a mobile pack house unit or whatever way possible, that to me seems to be a viable way to help the emerging farmers be more successful.
Caritas.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, I think there's often the wrong classification of the emerging market, where almost a blanket, it's almost like there's the big farmers and the small farmers. Whereas actually when you zoom into the emerging market, it's different kinds of farmers that meet different kinds of needs. And part of the reason why sometimes the state doesn't get it right, it's a lot of blanket solutions, where some of the guys, all they need is a railway to move from semi-commercial to a point where they can be commercialized. The much smaller guys probably need more of a communal approach in terms of sorting out, the issues that they have. I think the one thing we lack in South Africa is there's a lack of coherence, I guess, particularly within the different role players, especially in terms of getting the state more involved. We spent about 2 weeks in China with some 20 commercial farmers, and we're all so mind blown by how the state, private sector, and organizations work together intentionally in China to advance, the different growers. We're also so impressed by how they treat the smaller guys. Every solution is tailored, whereas I think in South Africa there's too much of, call it over blanketing of solutions. But I think organizations like SA, if you look at what Rendani and the team are doing, the stuff that they're doing is more tailored towards the guys that are much smaller, and then it also works for the guys that are more commercial. So I think there's a greater need for a more tailored approach if we're going to get it right. You can't have blanket solutions. Even at a per farmer level, there's a need for a tailored approach. And I think that will help us to kind of move closer in terms of solving things for emerging farmers, as opposed to just calling them emerging guys and hitting them with the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carmen, when we talk about the future, we also have to acknowledge that nutritional demands are changing. We all know we have to feed more people on the same amount of land in the future, but we are requiring more nutrition from the food we produce on land that has been producing for years, so that's why soil health is so important. How does that change the pressure placed on the potato industry? And what should people in this room be cognizant of when looking towards the future in terms of nutrition?
I think in the case of potatoes, it is a wonderful whole biological product. When we compare to the other starchy foods, because it is compared to a starchy food, it's going to be a struggle to get it classified as a vegetable. But in our hearts, it's a vegetable. But if we want it as the main starch portion on the plate, advertising it as a whole food as is, minimal processing went into a potato, all of the nutrients that are in the potato are highly biological available, where as soon as you start to alter foods or need to add nutrients, those nutrients aren't as highly bioavailable for the human body to absorb. So that's the wonderful thing of a potato. It's completely unprocessed. It has all these nutrients in the correct ratios that you need it in, and that's bioavailable, that can be absorbed instantly. And another thing that we spoke about before we came out was, if we want this as a future crop, something that we saw is we need to get our consumer young. You need to target the correct market to ensure that you get the consumer at the right age so that they become lifelong consumers. That's why we're looking at things like targeting the National School Nutrition Program, to get potatoes into the National School Nutrition Program, to get kids eating potatoes from a young age and being like, this is something that we eat on a daily basis. It's not an odd thing that we consume whenever it's available, that it becomes part of cultural and heritage foods, and that it's part of their dietary lexicon, that they consume it on a regular basis, and that they are comfortable with it and know how to cook with it. Because it's one of those things also, when we talk to the consumers about any product, the first thing that they want is recipes on how to cook it and how to use it, and they want to know what to do with the product and what can I do with it, and they have a limited amount of money to spend, so they want a product that they know is going to deliver and that's going to add value to their meal, their body, everything that they need. It is going to be worth their hard work money. So I think getting the children from a young age to consume it and going with that thing of this is a whole food that is a meal on its own, basically, with everything that it contains and the high quality nutrients that it has in it.
Whenever we talk about the consumers, I have this question about growing activism. And in various platforms, I know at AgBiz's conference last year, there was a speaker who spoke at length about growing activism globally around agricultural issues. And it worries me. I mean, and I don't want to give my age away here, I might be able to fake it for another couple of years, but when I was young, butter was the devil. You could not eat butter because it was going to kill you. It would clog your arteries and you would die at 30. Now, people are saying, oh, don't eat margarine. Margarine is processed, it's fake, it's plastic. Eat butter, it's brilliant for you. What messaging is out there in the world about potatoes? It's fattening, it's a starch, not a vegetable. Reduce carbohydrate intake, eat more proteins. And broader than just about potatoes, messaging about agriculture, the pesticides we use, the methods we use, how we treat the soil, how we treat people who work on our farms. This messaging is often controlled from outside the sector. Is the messaging true? Do you feel it reflects the truth of your businesses in the industry? And I'd like to get some input from our panelists to say, are there issues, activism issues, that you've picked up in your various positions that you think, hang on, if we're going to streamline the future of farming businesses to get the most out of them that we want to get, what messaging do we need to squash now?
I think messaging needs to be consistent. All of the mouths need to speak the same story. If one person says something and it's contradicted by someone else, then you lose your consumer, because where's the trust? So having science-based communication that is translated so that the consumer can understand it in an easy manner, and that the consumer also understands where the science comes from and how the science was conducted, and ensure that it's a one-stream messaging, but that it is delivered to the consumer at the different levels where they find it valuable and how they understand it and what is valuable to them. Because your high-end consumer and your low-end consumer don't want the same message. They need to hear the same, not the same wording, but they need to hear the same message, but delivered in a different manner. So getting that manner of delivering the message to the correct people, that the message that you convey is the same, is the trick. So consistency throughout the chain.
Annelies, I can see you're ready to jump.
We also need to understand that there's a mismatch between how the activists operate and how we tend to respond as the industry, because we tend to do exactly that. We bring the evidence, we bring the science, the facts, whilst activists, they were all about emotion, about storytelling, about victims and all of that. And they're very strong lobbies, environmental lobbies, anti-pesticide lobbies, anti-GMO lobbies, many of them international. So we also need, we need to keep doing what we're doing, but we also need to find ways of really addressing the emotion in all of this. And we're in an era of post-truth. Truth doesn't actually matter anymore. It's very difficult with social media and with all the activism.
And with AI. What is truth really?
To advocate successfully.
Absolutely. And just on that point, I love that you bring in the emotion. Because generally when you function in an environment that is based on science, like the research symposium, it's scientific, it's factual. And sometimes we forget that in the people we are selling to, emotion plays sometimes a bigger role in their decision making than the science or the fact. So when we speak to them, this consistent messaging that we need to create needs to be louder than the negative activism, and it needs to contain some emotional element to hook them. Willie.
Well, I think to a large extent, activism is like guerrilla warfare. It's heated debates in small periods of time that is targeted in certain areas. And this is where I want to agree with Carmen. You know, if you really want to be out there with a consistent message over a long period of time, it should basically address the volatility, because emotions is also volatile. It's a short-term aspect that you do something. If somebody wants to explain to me how this flippin' energy drink that was so popular for 3 days in South Africa going to play, then we can understand how we're going to be able to actually address these issues. Yeah. But the idea is consistently start them young, get them used to it, make it part of your daily life, not only part of a message, and then integrate it as far as possible. But I think what we can do is, as we introduce potatoes, let's call it to the youngsters, we also need to introduce the storyline behind potato production and the actual load that the farmers carry to get the product there in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Yes, Peter.
So what I've heard here, that the potatoes you sell in the market are nice skin and water.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't sound good to me. But if you look at that it has, I think, 11 or 10 of the essential amino acids that our body needs as protein. If it has high levels of potassium, which your body needs, and zinc and iron and other elements, that to me is what needs to be sold to the consumer as well. Not just the nice skin and water, which is the potatoes. The Mondial variety is a very wet potato. I was surprised the low gravities here. So anyway, I think we need to sell what's the benefits of it health-wise as well.
Absolutely. We are running out of time here, so I want to open the floor and see if any of you have questions about the future of the space, the future of potatoes, the regulatory space, innovation, and then you're more than welcome to put your questions to our panelists. Perhaps we can get some light so that we can see where there are hands. Or if you just put your desk mic on, you can just yell your question. Any questions? Here we go, sorry.
Talking about the tariffs, which is going to kick in a couple of days, what effect is that going to have on the potato industry, and what is Potatoes SA doing to position themselves to be of good assistance to their member with regards to the tariffs, to America specifically?
Question is about the trade tariffs that's kicking in at the end of the month, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe but this is going to be a little bit of a shot in the dark. I mean, obviously, the fact that we are trying to open certain export markets is going to influence it, because it's not only South Africa and the US that's going to be influenced. Everybody's going to react in a different way. So I think the repercussions of what's going to happen is what concerns me most. I think luckily for the potato industry is we are working in a custom union to a large extent where most of our product is being moved. But it's definitely going to complicate our issues to try to do deep water exports going forward as well. And not only to the destinations like the US. I think the rest of the world is going to follow suit.
Any more questions from the audience? Sorry, I'm blind. This one, the lights are very bright. There we go. Yes, go ahead.
I don't have a question. I picked up Mr. Paul J. Elson's credit card.
If you figure out the pin, let me know.
Swipe it a few times before you get
In the front here, yes.
Ek gaan hard praat, projekteer, want ek weet nie hoe die werk nie en ek's nervous daaroor. Ek kom van Piraklim af, ons werk met terrein en klimaatdata vir die landbousektor. Ek wil net die potato messaging, die ding wat my aanvanklik oortuig het om weer te begin aardappels eet, was die feit dat dit propvol Vitamiin C is. Ek het geen idee ooit gehad dat daar Vitamiin C in aardappels nie. En dit is ontsettend goed vir jou vel en goedkoop, en ek het gehoor dit is meer as wat daar in lemoene is. So dit is 'n baie strong message for consumers.
I'm sorry, I think I'm going to burst your bubble now.
Oh, no. He thought it was the answer to
Don't do
Korean skincare.
But that is one of those things where we need consistent messaging. And sorry if I'm going to say this in the forum, there is vitamin C in a potato, but as soon as you heat vitamin C, it's irrelevant. It dies with heat. And that's one of the things, if we're going to push out a message that says potatoes are high in vitamin C, yes, they are if you eat them raw. But so that is the issue of if you say this to someone who knows something about vitamin C, they're going to be, yeah, but this is not a science-backed message that you are sending. And on the linking to the protein quality, the potatoes are one of the only vegetables that contain all 9 essential amino acids in the correct form. A lot of our other vegetables have high amounts of a certain amino acid and then low amounts of another one, so that makes them an incomplete protein. Where even though potatoes have between 1 and 2 gram per 100 gram product protein, it is a highly bioavailable form of protein. So the quality of protein is the same as meat and potatoes, meat and eggs, where with other vegetables you don't have that. So the quantity might be very, very little, but the quality is 100% absorbable.
Isn't it interesting? Then when we advertise things like shampoo, they'll tell us it's full of hyaluronic acid and keratin and all this stuff. We know what this stuff is, but we don't know what's in our food. Any more questions from the audience? No questions from the audience. On that note then, I would like to give each of you a very brief 30 seconds to give a final thought, because this is also the closing for the speaker sessions, and then after this we're going to have the Potato Industry Forum. So this is your last chance to speak up. If we've missed an important message, now's your time. We'll start with you, Annelies.
I think what would go a great way in enhancing the industry, agriculture industry in general, is more flexibility on the part of the regulators.
More flexibility.
Yeah, I think on the activism point that you mentioned, I think there's a lot of good work, really, really good work, and being done by really, really good people in our industry, but I think we're very quiet about it. I think one of the problems in the country is that the people that represent us paint us with one color and another color, but there's actually a lot of collaboration and a lot of good work being done by really good people, whether it's commercial, emerging, black, white, pink, yellow. There's a lot of collaboration and a lot of good work being done, but because we're quiet, the narrative about us out there is not correct. And I think there's an onus on us in the room to be a lot more bold and a lot more out there to share the good stories that we experience in agriculture on a daily basis, that we see on a daily basis, to not allow ourselves to be painted by the voices that represent us. I think that should be a key message, that the good work being done, we need to take it out there.
Shine your shine. Peter.
Now, I just want to say congratulations. I've been so impressed with all what you do here, and I hope that many of you will come to Kenya in 2026, October, to share your experience and your knowledge with many who come from around the world, that you can lift your profile and be seen in the whole world.
Thank you, Peter. I think that enhances Caritas' conversation. We have to, what do they say? You cannot, this is Dr. Johan van Deventer's voice. You can't blow kisses at the girl in the dark. I will never forget that, because we have to turn the lights on. For us to be able to switch the lights on, I think it's necessary for us collectively to collaborate. And that's going to be my final parting gift as well. Collaboration is the key. We cannot stand alone as a potato industry itself. Our farmers are not only potato farmers. They are farmers of different scales and different types and different products. And if we cannot get that voices consolidated so that it can make the light shine louder, it's going to be much more difficult for us to actually get the legislation to be working for us as producers.
I'm going to steal a logo from a tagline from somewhere. Stronger, together we are stronger. Is that the Springbok?
Stronger, better, faster.
Stronger together.
Stronger together. There we go. Carmen.
I have a twofold one. I think firstly, if the consumer could see how much love goes into potato farming and how the farmers really, they love their potatoes and how much work they put into it, that will be, it will be heartening for the consumer. And then also teaching consumers how to store a potato correctly. If they put a potato in a food bowl, it's a disaster. Store your potato correctly and you'll get so much more from it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you to our panelists. We appreciate your insights. That is the last session for this afternoon.